Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share park ranger horror stories. First story. This story was shared by you/a__random_redditor_. After 6 years of working as park ranger I quit, here's why. Hello, this is the story of how I quit my job. This isn't a liberating story of breaking the shackles and going to my dream job. This is a story of leaving a demonic place. I am a park ranger. It all goes back to 1 week ago. I was in my truck taking the usual route around the park until I saw a white van. It wasn't even on the trail. It was just sitting there in the middle of the forest. I called in a 10-92, illegally parked vehicle. Until my radio went off, 10-4, permission to investigate. I exited my truck and walked toward the van. The environment was completely silent, except for my engine still running, and my footsteps which seemed ever so loud. I walked around the van. Nothing seemed odd till I got to the other side of the van. I saw a black pentagram spray painted on the van. I started to notice that there were scuff marks and little blemishes here and there. I was walking back to my vehicle to call in tow when I heard a roar. It didn't sound like a bear. It sounded like something more demonic. I walked toward the source of the sound. I walked past the van and walked, flashlight in hand. I heard its violent cries again. I pulled my gun out and stood frozen. I heard footsteps zoom behind me. I turned around to see nothing. I blew a sigh of relief, knowing it was all probably in my head. I walked back to my car and called in a tow truck. I looked out into the forest. I noticed 2 red eyes staring back at me. I blinked and they were gone. I thought it had to be in my head. It had to. There's no such thing as monsters repeating in my brain like a broken record. Eventually the tow truck pulled up. The man got out and I got out of my car too. "You look worse for wear," the tow man said. "Lack of sleep," I said. That was somewhat true. I was too embarrassed to say I was terrified. Eventually we hooked up the van and that was that. I got in my truck and drove off. That was the end of it, or that's what I thought. After getting a few complaints and other issues, I started to relax again. The only thing that bothered me was I felt like I was being watched. Eventually I came up to a downed tree blocking the path. I checked my GPS and called in. "We have a 10-53 at J28 Southeast. Then I heard 10-12, "We are sending assistance." As I got out of my car I walked towards the fallen tree. I tried to push it to see if I could make some progress, while I waited for backup. It was useless. I kicked it in frustration. Then I heard it. Not again, I thought. My heart was racing. Snap! A twig snapped and I instantly turned around. It was tall and muscular. I raised my flashlight and saw its face. Oh God, the face. It had long goat horns and the face of a goat, with dark red eyes. Those eyes, it had been following me. I was face to face with the goat man. I dropped my flashlight and ran with a gun in hand. I ran, but I could hear this thing getting closer. I knew it would catch me, so I turned around and fired off a few shots. That seemed to scare it. I looked and managed to get a headshot, yet I still stood. It looked at me and fled into the distance. I ignored the 10-53 and got into my car and drove off. I went to one of the ranger centers and reported it in. Apparently there's been multiple reports. There have been multiple reports and they did nothing. I turned in my badge at that moment. I'm haunted by that thing. Its eyes still appear in my nightmares. After 6 dead-acted years of working there I quit. I regret it a bit, but I hope I never see the goat man again. Second story. This story was shared by u/a__random_redditor_. I'm a park ranger who witnessed something strange. It's Christmas Eve, and that means holiday cheer. However, for me that always means work. I work at a national park, so I will not say the name for my privacy. Anyway, I work as a park ranger, and I always work around the holidays. Despite what my coworkers think, I don't mind the holidays. I just like the alone time. Not many park rangers work around the holidays. Sure, it's extra work, but it's always fine. Anyway, I'm telling you about this because of a strange occurrence I experienced yesterday. It was a slow day, most people were at home celebrating. I got a call on my radio about a missing hiker. It wasn't too far from my location, so I took it. I hopped into my Jeep and drove over there. As I was driving, I noticed a big lump on the path. I got out of my car and walked towards it. It reeked. Unfortunately, I recognized the smell. It was a dead animal. I turned on my flashlight and it was a deer. Its throat was slashed open and much worse was done to it. I'm used to seeing dead animals, but what happened to this deer made me want to vomit. I shivered. I grabbed a box from my pocket and pulled out a cigarette, and lit it with my lighter. It warmed my body in the frozen air. It's a bad habit I've been trying to break, but I just can never break it. I went back to my car to call it in and drove past it. Then I heard the worst, and my tire popped. I went out to check it and it appeared that it was popped by a sharp rock. Unfortunately, I already used my spare tire and forgot to replace it. It appeared I would be walking. The missing hiker was only about a mile away, anyway. I looked up to see the clouds pull apart to reveal the full moon. I quickly heard a woman scream. I ran towards the shout. "Miss! Where are you?" I screamed. The scream became more beastly and animalistic. I turned on my flashlight when I stepped on something. Torn clothes, and a boot, women's size 7. Then as I was walking, I heard a branch break behind me. I turned around to see animalistic eyes. They looked almost human. I put my flashlight on the pair of eyes. It appeared wolf-like. I dropped my flashlight in fear. My brain screamed to run. My legs began to make me move in the opposite direction from whatever that thing was. I knew whatever it was chasing me. I heard its footsteps behind me. I ran praying that I could get away. I decided to head to my car. But the worst that could happen, happened. I tripped and tumbled down a hill, hitting my head on a rock on the way down. Everything was becoming a blur, and I felt whatever it was bite down on my shoulder. As if instinct, I grabbed my gun. Remembering it was there, I fired off randomly, hoping I hit it. It ran off, making sounds of pain. I knew I couldn't let myself pass out. I felt around my belt and couldn't find my flare. I began crawling around in pain, hoping I'd find it. I felt my arm getting numb. I laid over facing the sky with my gun clenched in my hand, hoping it wouldn't come back. Everything went black. I woke up shortly after in a Ranger Jeep. It was the new guy. My arm was poorly tied with a rag. He looked over at me. "You got pretty banged up. What the hell attacked you?" he asked. "A monster," I responded. I don't remember what he said as I zoned out. Eventually we got to the ER, and they stitched me up. Today strange things have been happening. When I was trying to sleep, I couldn't get a wink of sleep. I was just so hungry. I went to the fridge and ate the raw steak, eating every bit of it. I keep biting my tongue. It appears as if my teeth have gotten sharper too. The park said I could take the day off, but I refused. My arm feels better already. It's strange, I'm a bit worried if I'll see that thing again and if it will be my end on Christmas Eve, but I have to figure out what that thing is and make sure it can't hurt anyone. I also know what it's done to me. If anyone has info on the creature, please tell me. Third story. This story was shared by you/Dramantis. I'm a park ranger, and in order to survive, I had to make my own rules. I've been a park ranger for a little under 6 months, and I almost quit in my first week. You see, I've always preferred being in nature as opposed to the city, mostly because I enjoy the quiet, and when I was a kid, watching Crocodile Hunter and other nature conservation shows and stories, I love animals. The things I've seen and had to deal with, though, I'm not sure they classify as even real. The first night I showed up to work, I arrived 10 minutes early, and little did I know at the time, it was the worst mistake I made on my first day. It's a small park, and it didn't need more than 2 rangers on site at a time, but most of the time we just had one. I was greeted by the ranger from the shift before on arrival and given the rundown of what I'd be doing that night, mostly just hanging out in the information building and monitoring trail and site cameras. Once every couple of hours in the 10-hour shift, I would patrol one of the 4 quadrants the park was divided into. What no one told me my first day, is that the night shift park ranger either goes missing or dies within the first week. I found this out later that night, and not from the first shift ranger. After the first 2 hours of monitoring cameras and helping the 2 people that stopped by the information center, I set out on patrol, choosing the quadrant I went to at random. In the end, I decided on the east quadrant, one of the more undisturbed areas of the park. I hopped in a sorry excuse for a patrol car, more like a buggy or ATV than a car, and headed towards the east quadrant. It was a quiet drive for the most part, except for the sounds of crickets and occasional owls hoot. But as I got closer to the east quadrant, I noticed the sounds began to die away, slowly but surely, until all was silent. I preferred the quiet anyway, so the sounds dying away was less alarming than it was calming for me. I had a smile on my face as I began making my round. I expected not to find many, if any, campers in this section of the park. But about halfway through my patrol, I came across a bald man stumbling down the trail. I stopped the car a little ways away from him, weak headlights shining directly at him. I pulled out my flashlight and hopped out of the car, approaching the hobbling man. "Excuse me, sir. Are you all right? You don't look that well." He had stopped dead in his tracks when I noticed him, but I hardly took notice of it as I approached. The only thing that struck me as strange was the fact that the man had his head tilted down, so a shadow cast across his face. He spoke with a speech impediment. He spoke slowly and deeply, and it sounded like his mouth was stuffed with bread. Ran. Grr, he hadn't moved a muscle, and I never saw his mouth open as he spoke. It struck me as odd and I stopped with a little bit of distance between us. The injured-looking man hadn't moved at all since I spotted him. "You must be the new ranger." I noticed a slight amount of movement in the shadows splayed across his face, and a small amount of noise, like something being sharpened or sliced. I found it odd that this man was able to identify me as the new ranger, but maybe he was just a regular to the park. "I am, do you need help?" "It sh been so long since I've had a meal, ran. Help me." I had brought along a few protein bars with me, wanting a snack for the shift, and I had brought some along as I didn't know how long the patrol would take. "Come with me, back over to my patrol car." "Have you been lost out here, sir? Do you need any assistance other than food?" The strange man made no move to come closer, he just stood where I had first found him, stone still. I am only hungry. Ranger. I stared at him for a few more moments, before turning to walk back to my patrol car. Then come with me, I'll give you some protein bars, and after that, I think you should come with me. I trailed off because at that moment I felt and heard something behind me, breathing down my neck and breathing heavily. From behind, I heard, "Last mistake you'll ever make, Ranger. Now I can eat." I heard the snapping of bones from behind me as the strange man slammed into my back, winding me and knocking me to the ground. I tried to catch my breath and scramble up and towards my patrol car, but with surprising speed after such a forceful blow, the man put all of his weight onto my back. I heard a guttural sound coming from the man behind me and felt a slimy smattering of something wet drip onto and soak through my uniform. I had begun to recover from the blow to my back and noticed I still clutched the flashlight in my hand. I took in a sharp quick breath, bracing myself as I twisted and swung wildly, connecting with the butt of the flashlight to something, as his foot slid off my back. I took a look up at the man and noticed the most horrifying image I'd ever seen up to that point. His mouth hung open in the most inhuman way, and rows of long needle and saw-like teeth, the number of which was impossibly large. Drool dripped from his mouth and the sickly sweet smell of rotting flesh and death assaulted my nostrils. The man was posed like a tiger ready to pounce as I stared at him, but the longer I stared in horror at this monstrosity, the more I noticed he wouldn't move a muscle. The creature in front of me snarled as I began backing up slowly, scooting my way across the ground towards the patrol car. "You got lucky this time, Jar. I'll get you next time you come to this place, just like the last." He made a noise, an unearthly noise like stones grinding together mixed with the call of a wild animal. Something about his face gave me the impression he was amused, like he was laughing. I got to my feet and kept eye contact as I opened the door to my patrol car and climbed inside, trembling and struggling to get the key into the ignition as I stared at the creature. I noticed he still didn't move if I blinked, so luckily I didn't have to strain my eyes, but multitasking and spatial awareness were already not my strong suit. I struggled for another 5 minutes before starting the patrol vehicle back up and I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, swerving around the man trying to make my way around the circuit to get back to the information center. The haunting laughter of the creature followed me as it echoed throughout the forest. I feel like he let me go on purpose. It's like he got bored of easy kills, and now he wants to hunt me. I hastily completed the circuit and made it back to the information center. This thing had told me he had killed other rangers in the past, but there's no mention at all of anything like him in the park. So as soon as I made it back to the information center, I began to write out a list, a reminder for myself and the next ranger after I quit this place because at the time I convinced myself I was going to be able to quit. I took a sheet of printer paper from the machine and began writing, rules to survive the night shift. Rule 1, never break line of sight with the bald man with the strange lisp. If you do, pray he lets you go. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/horror_writer_1717. I'm a park ranger and something is stalking the local hikers. I'm a park ranger, but I'm leaving my name and the name of the park out of this post intentionally. The names of all those involved have been changed as well. I needed to get this story out there but cannot rely on conventional avenues. That's why I'm posting it here. I could lose my job or much worse, but this story has to be told. I owe it to Catherine, not her real name. I arrived at the ranger station like any other day. I was given my section of the park to patrol. Unfortunately, the park is massive and my section usually includes half of it. So there isn't much chance for leisurely strolls on the trails. I hopped in my work vehicle, a 10-year-old 4x4, and headed out to see if anyone needed assistance. It didn't take long to find someone. At the first campground, there was a man who couldn't get his camper started. A quick jump got him rolling along. Next was a couple needing directions. Then an overturned canoe. I had only made it a few miles through the park. I was going to have to move if I hoped to make a full route today. I managed to grab a few quick bites of lunch and put some miles on without anyone needing help when the call came over the radio. There was a hiker that found something and I needed to go check it out. A half hour later I was talking to a middle-aged woman who had made a concerning discovery. She found a hat and a note on the trail. I read the note. I'm writing this note and leaving it behind because I'm not sure what's happening. The 5 of us friends have been planning this trip forever, even since long before we graduated, but it always seemed like something came up at the last minute and one or more of us couldn't go. For a while, I was almost convinced that some outside force was working against us. That we were cursed not to go camping together until we were all too old to enjoy it. I could picture Devin now. He would still go even if he was so old he had to use a walker on the trail. He's always up for camping. I think the guy carries a loaded backpack in his car with him everywhere he goes. LOL. Adrienne got here right behind us, followed soon after by Dean. Of course, Terry was the last one to show. We started up the trail in great spirits. 3 miles and the sun was just starting to heat up. We were making good time towards the rustic campground when Devin decided to take a detour. He said he'd heard about an old trail that no one used anymore and wanted to check it out. I said we should keep going the way we were, but I was outvoted. I honestly don't think Terry's vote should have counted since he was obviously stoned and Devin just bullied him into saying yes. We came to a spot with a large stone off to the side of the trail. Devin said it was the trailhead, but I didn't see any trail. He led us through some heavy brush, but on the other side it cleared out and we could see the faint impression of an overgrown trail. I went last and left my hat on the stone in case we got lost and needed to be rescued. I think that's exactly where we're heading, straight toward Lost. I'll leave this note under my hat and hope that someone finds us. I asked the woman to show me where she'd found it and she showed me. 3 miles later, I was staring at the rock I hoped I would never see again. I radioed my location to the station and told them if they didn't hear from me in a couple of hours to send a search party to the old abandoned trail. I wished I would have brought my supplies with me. My backpack, and my sidearm, but they were 3 miles away and I didn't know how long these kids had been on this trail. I knew that wasted time could mean the difference between life and death. At least I had my knife, flashlight, and binocs. So I thanked the woman, placed the red hat back on the stone just in case, and headed into the heavy brush. Once through the initial overgrowth, the trail became visible. Old memories flashed through my head. Ones I never wanted to think of again. I took a deep breath and headed down the trail. It was overgrown for the first mile or so and then it opened up into a field. I could see people had walked through before me by the way the weeds were partially trampled. As I walked through, a deer jumped ahead of me, startling me. Until that moment I didn't realize how jumpy I was. I tried to settle down and tell myself that these kids were just lost and I could catch up to them and get them out. Telling myself that didn't make the memories go away. I entered a clearing with a fallen log and another note with a rock sitting on it. I think I'm being silly. This trail isn't so bad. Maybe I was wrong. Devin seems to know where he's going. I just can't shake this feeling that we're being watched. Sometimes I'll look around and I swear I see a face disappear behind a tree. Am I being paranoid? Maybe if the birds would start singing again that would lighten my mood. But I haven't heard a bird or any other animal for a while. I wonder why they're being so quiet. Are they afraid of us? On another note, Terry seems to be brooding more than usual. Maybe he forgot to bring enough of his stash to last the trip. Devin is in his glory since everyone has to rely on him for directions. Adrienne and Dean seem to be along for the ride. Although I have noticed Dean looking around at the trees as well. Maybe I'll ask him if he sees anything. If you're trying to track us down, I hope we aren't being too much bother. I just have this feeling. I folded the note and stuck it in my pocket, then prayed she was wrong about being followed. I pushed on, beginning to miss my backpack with the supplies in it, especially the water bottles. The trees provided some shade so the sunlight wasn't shining directly on me, but hiking is always thirsty work. The birds chirping in the trees made me almost forget about the desperate mission I was on to save these 5 kids. My mind wandered back to the kid I couldn't save. It had been shortly after I started as a park ranger. An 11-year-old boy had gotten lost on this very trail. His parents searched frantically for him before calling us in to look. I remember hoping to be the one to find him as we formed search parties and searched on, in, and around every inch of the trail. In the end, I got my wish. I found him, but I wish I hadn't. I pushed the memory to the back of my mind and focused on the trail. It was starting to fade. The trampling of feet wasn't making enough of a difference and I was starting to lose my way. Out here that can be deadly. I kept moving forward and finally regained the trail just in time to reach the fork. I looked back and forth from one choice to the other and couldn't see a difference between the two. I searched for any broken twigs or plants that would give me a hint, but there were none. Just when I was about to give up and flip a coin, I saw a piece of paper in the weeds barely visible. I dug it out and read it. It seems like we have a dilemma. A fork in the road, as it were. You would think I would be happy to see the doubt in Devin's eyes as he looked from one choice to the other, but you'd be wrong. It made my confidence plummet. It made me think that we were never getting out of here. Everyone's running out of water. Devin yelled at us for not conserving, but I saw him drink the last of his 2. He ranted and raved at us for a while, but we all knew that he was just mad because he didn't know what to do. In the end, he flipped a coin. We all did our best not to laugh. Adrienne is reaching the end of her rope with Devin and his attitude. Dean has been playing peacemaker, trying to keep them from going at it too much. Terry was been way too quiet. I haven't seen him light up once. Something's up with him, but every time I ask he says it's nothing. The birds still aren't singing and it's starting to really bother me. The strange feeling I have hasn't gone away. I asked Dean if he had seen anything strange, but he won't talk about it. We've been on this trail for a while. I'm hoping to come to the end soon. By the way, in case the note got moved or blown around, we took the left trail. I was panicked by the end of reading that note and so relieved she mentioned which trail to take. I radioed in and reported that I was on the trail of the missing hikers. I mentioned a fork and taking the left side. I was told that there was no search party going on yet. That I was the only one looking for these kids. It was the complete opposite of years ago looking for that kid. Everyone was searching. I know we combed every inch of that wilderness. But that's the thing about the woods. You can search every nook and cranny, but something can still stay hidden. The sun was going down and I still had no idea how close I was to catching up to these kids. I could stumble across them in the next clearing, or they could be hours ahead of me. I met with the woman who showed me the hat and note in the afternoon. If they started out around daybreak, they could be a good 5 or 6 hours ahead of me. If the leader is so driven to continue, it's hard to say how far they might be. I continued following the trail until I came to a fallen tree across a river. I looked both ways along the edge of the water but saw no trail, so I made my way across the tree. I could picture the debate the kids had when they got here. I chuckled at the thought of Devon having to convince them to go across. I believe I made up a lot of time with that single crossing. I jumped down to the water and drank my fill, then climbed back up feeling much better. It was tough to pick up the trail on the other side. I was glad to find a note sticking to a branch. Oh my gosh, Devon just about came unglued when we got to that tree over the river. He hopped up on it right away and started across. But the rest of us weren't so sure the trail led that way. We asked him how a trail could be planned with a fallen tree as part of it. He sputtered and stomped and told us how lost we'd be without him. Dean had finally had enough and told him we were lost because of him. I seriously thought Devon was gonna take a swing at him until Terry of all people came to his side and told Devon to shut up. The rest of us all came together and told Devon he could keep leading us as long as he stopped acting like a petty tyrant. He didn't take it well. In the end, he told us we could all go to hell. He sat on the log and refused to move. Eventually, after we took a break and refilled our water bottles in the river, Dean said we should get going and led us across the tree. Devon followed along acting like a whipped puppy. Dean and I talked about the disappearing face we'd seen a while back, but neither of us had seen it again. At least the birds are back to singing. I chuckled, figuring that Devon would be a big baby over the whole thing. But after the chuckle came concern. Deposed leaders are usually dangerous. I wondered how much offense Devon had taken and if he would be looking to get some payback in some small or large way. Darkness was coming on fast in the woods. I had to make a decision. Camp for the night or keep going. If I camped, I could defend against the predators that lurked in the darkness. But if I kept moving, there was a good chance I could stumble across the group before daybreak. It wasn't much of a decision. These kids that I didn't even know, that I had plunged headfirst into the woods without even my backpack of supplies. Of course, I was going to try to catch up with them. If I had done that years back, would that kid still be alive? Such thoughts nagged at me. Most days I kept them at bay, but here in this same forest, close to the spot where I found him, I needed to focus. If I'm going to keep after them, then I need to get going. I stepped off the trail to take a piss and heard a metallic snap. At the same time, I felt intense pain shoot up my leg. I looked down and I had stepped into a bear trap. I screamed, fell to the ground, and rocked back and forth in agony. After a few minutes, I focused on getting the trap off my leg. I found a branch and pried the trap open, screaming the entire time. I managed to pull the trap off my leg and threw it to the side. I really didn't want to take my boot off, but I had to see the damage. It took every ounce of effort I could muster to unlace the boot and pull it off. My leg was purple. I felt along the wound very gently, but there didn't seem to be any break. That didn't mean I wasn't going to be limping for the next month. But it did mean I would buy this brand of boots for the rest of my life. It took much more effort and some more screaming to put the boot back on, but I knew I needed to keep moving. I laced up the boot and found a sturdy branch to use as a crutch. I struggled to my feet and took my first few ginger steps. Once I got into a rhythm it got easier, but I couldn't walk as fast as I had been. Of course, when I was at my weakest was when I heard footsteps in the trees close to me. I knew there was a predator around just because it could sense I was vulnerable. I leaned against a tree and held my crutch ready as a weapon. The footsteps came closer. They paused as if they knew I was ready, then slowly continued stalking me. They were deliberate but slow. Each step seemed measured as if waiting for the right moment to strike. I heard it right next to the tree I was hiding behind. I whipped around as best I could and raised my crutch to strike. A deer stared at me for a heartbeat and then turned and ran through the forest. I collapsed against the tree and slid down to the ground, allowing the adrenaline to bleed off. I don't remember falling asleep. I woke to sandpaper scraping the side of my face. I opened my eyes and there was a bear beside me, licking my cheek. I freaked out, screamed, and rolled away from it. The bear wasn't ready for that reaction. It startled and ran away. I slowed my rapid breathing and looked around. It was dark. There were thin shafts of moonlight beaming through the trees providing a little light. I checked my watch and it was nearly 4 in the morning. I rose slowly and gingerly on my injured ankle, took the small flashlight out of my pocket, and prayed it still worked. My prayers were answered when the beam shone brightly through the woods. I panned around trying to get my bearings. After a moment I found the trail and started hobbling toward it. The nightly noises were a comfort. At least if the crickets were chirping and the rest of the forest was singing its nightly tune, that meant predators weren't around. I stumbled and fell, hitting my injured ankle against a rock. The pain overwhelmed me and I screamed. After a few minutes of recovery, I got up and continued at a slower pace, paying more attention to the ground. I chided myself for falling asleep and losing so much time. At least the trail was easy to follow. I continued on through the night hoping I wasn't too late. I started thinking about the boy I'd failed to rescue and what would happen if I failed to rescue these kids. I'm sure the Rangers department would say I did my best. I wasn't worried about them, it was me. Would I be able to forgive myself for letting something happen again? My thoughts were interrupted when I stumbled into a clearing. Not just any clearing. There were the remnants of a fire. There were impressions from tent pegs being pulled out of the ground. All around were the signs of a very recent campsite, including a tent that was still set up. I got so excited I nearly fell over my crutch looking around for signs of anything. The tent was a mixed blessing. It was very ominous that it was still here while the others were gone, but I was able to find some supplies to take along for my search. The most important was food. I shoved some protein bars in my pocket while devouring some beef jerky. I also grabbed 2 bottles of water from the pack. I stumbled across a note sitting under a rock beside the smoldering fire. Before I sat, I held my hand out to the fire. It was still warm, but the embers were nearly dead. It had been hours since it was first lit. If I hadn't taken my unintentional nap, I would have caught up with them. There was nothing I could do but sit by the dying fire and read the note. Hoping there was good news. We found this clearing and decided to camp. Everyone was tired from walking and the mood was somber because no one seemed to know where we were. All of us had been hiking in this forest before, but none of us had ever seen or heard of this trail. We set up our tents and started a fire, then had some supper and sat around. No one really felt like talking, so I tried to get the ball rolling by asking Terry why he was late. He hesitated, but at my prompting eventually, he told us that he had hit an animal with his car on the way here. I asked if it was a deer and he said no, it was much too big to be a deer. He said it walked upright on two legs and it was massive, like 8 feet tall, covered in brown hair. He swerved to miss it, but the strangest thing was it seemed to try to jump in front of him anyway, like it wanted him to stop. We all listened with rapt attention. Just then, off in the distance, we heard a scream. We all froze. Devin started spouting off and yelling at Terry for trying to scare us, then he stormed off. Dean tried to stop him, but he pushed him away and disappeared in the woods. The rest of us talked, trying to decide if we should go look for him, but in the end, we figured we should just let him go and cool off. A short while later we heard a rustling off in the distance and a muffled cry. We huddled a little closer together and went on high alert. Our eyes darted back and forth as we searched the impenetrable wall of trees surrounding us, looking for any sign of a predator. Right then the strangest thing happened. All the nightly noises stopped. The crickets, the squirrels, the owls, every sound that you usually hear in the forest at night simply ceased. It was unnerving. For a moment I wondered if I hadn't gone deaf. Our eyes darted all around in the darkness. We all huddled closer to the fire. Dean pulled out his hunting knife. None of us said a word. It was like if we spoke something bad would happen. Somehow whatever caused the noises to stop would find us if we spoke. Someone did speak though, just not who we expected. "Why are you here?" came a raspy, deep voice that seemed to echo from everywhere. We looked all around and finally, a man stepped into the light. He was large, well over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders, and older, maybe in his 50s or 60s. He was also wearing a park ranger's uniform. It looked old and shabby, like he had been wearing it for a long time. There were no name tag or park patches. At that point, we didn't care. We had been rescued. We clamored around him saying how glad we were that he had found us. We told him about going on the trail and how we weren't sure where we even were. The man listened, then slowly said, "You shouldn't be here." We all looked at each other. I'm sure the others thought the same as me. "No shit, we shouldn't be here, we just told you that." He continued to look at us from one to the other as though sizing us up. I was starting to get a little uncomfortable with his silence. I would have thought he would offer to guide us, but he didn't. He kept staring. I think everyone else was getting a little edgy as well when Dean asked if he could point us in the right direction. He looked at Dean as if deciding to answer him or not. "I can guide you," he said. "But first you should have some rest." We all agreed that the day had been long and stressful. We decided to take his advice and turn in. We offered him some food and water, but he refused, saying he wasn't hungry. We each went to our tents and laid down. Before I settled in and finished this note, I popped my head back out of my tent to check on our guide. He was sitting by the fire staring into the orange coals. I thought I heard him mumbling or maybe humming something softly. I quietly zipped up my tent and went to sleep. Sometime later someone banged on my tent. I woke and unzipped it to find the ranger with a strange look in his eyes. "We need to go." "Why?" I said, rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. "It's not safe here," he said with an edge of panic in his voice. I popped back into my tent to change. Then came out and met with everyone. They were all in states of semi-consciousness as well. Everyone but the ranger seemed to be confused. "Pack up, we need to leave," he said a little more forcefully. I was about to protest when I heard a piercing scream in the distance. His head shot up and he stared in the direction of the sound. "Move it," he said. "Pack up." We didn't need to be told again. The scream brought us all fully awake. We tore down our tents in record time and packed everything into our backpacks. As I was finishing up, I noticed Devon's tent was still up. "Where's Devon?" I said. "Who's Devon?" the ranger said. "He's another one of our friends," I said. "He went off into the woods alone right before you got here." "He didn't come back," the ranger said. "Should we go look for him?" I said. The ranger extended his arms and did a slow circle. "Which way would you go?" he said. I understood his point. How would we know where he had gone, if he was still on the path or not? It just seemed like we should do something. "What about his gear?" I said. "Do we take it with us?" The ranger looked at me like he was annoyed at having to answer such questions. "Leave it here in case he comes back," he said. "He'll need his supplies." I'm not sure if I'll keep leaving notes or not now that we have the ranger to guide us. Whoever finds this, please look for Devon and make sure he's okay. A ranger? All the rangers at this park are in their 30s or 40s. Maybe it was someone who retired and was just roaming around out there. But why would he be in a ranger outfit? Sitting here by the dying embers of the fire, with a tent set up in front of me, it was very tempting to take a rest. If they're in the hands of a capable ranger, I could get some rest before the long hike back out of here. But I knew I had already taken my rest for the night. If not for that, I would have been here hours ago, probably before the other ranger. I set out again feeling tired but determined. The campsite made me more hopeful than I had been all day. At least they were together and thinking like campers. If only I knew who this ranger was. The sun was an hour away from rising, so I took out my flashlight to follow the trail. I zipped up the tent before I left, just in case its owner did come back. Wouldn't want animals getting in and taking everything. It's bad enough when injured park rangers do it. The trail stayed level for a while as dawn peeked over the trees. The trail started heading upward, which was bad news for me and my bum ankle. It made things harder, but I had my trusty makeshift crutch to help me. Dawn crept into the forest, giving me a little assistance. At least I wouldn't have to waste a hand holding a flashlight. As the climb grew steeper, the trail grew more narrow. At times it was only the width of 1 foot. I held on to trees and whatever I could as I scaled the extremely narrow trail. At the most difficult, I paused and seriously considered turning back. As I looked around for any other way to keep going, I saw brightly colored fabric at the bottom of the ravine. I carefully balanced as I took out my binoculars and looked. It was a backpack, and attached to it was the body of a girl in her early 20s. She looked like she had hit her head on the rocks at the bottom. Her face was bloody and mauled. Her clothes were ripped and soaked in blood. There was no doubt an animal had gotten to her. The only question was she alive when it started feeding on her? I looked away but felt my determination double to find these missing kids. They might be with a ranger, but they were still in terrible danger. I slowly continued up the narrow trail. At times I was sure the ground would give out from under me and I would share the same fate as the poor unfortunate girl at the bottom of the ravine. It was then I remembered my radio. I tried to call in and report the location of the body, but the only response I got was static. I determined to try again when I got to the top of the trail. It was yet another motivation to keep going, to be careful, to survive. It seemed like hours at a snail's pace working my way up the side of that ravine. Finally, I clawed my way over the edge to the top. I rolled over onto solid ground and lay there for a few minutes. Once I caught my breath, I got up slowly and painfully. I hadn't done my ankle any favors. I limped toward what looked like the trail and began following. It wasn't long before I came across the remnants of another campsite. The fire was a little warmer than the last one. I stoked it up, threw some more wood on, and got it going. I knew I needed some rest. I searched around and found a note, then sat down on a log by the fire to read it. I can't believe Adrienne's gone. We started up this steep ravine and the trail kept getting more narrow. I asked the ranger if there was any other way around, but he just glared at me and said no. We all struggled with our heavy packs on our backs. At one point I was on all fours just trying to keep from sliding into the ravine. That's when it happened. Adrienne was having trouble keeping her feet on the trail. She kept slipping. I reached out and helped her balance a few times. Being right in front of me, I kept an eye on her whenever I could. That wasn't nearly as much as I wanted because I was watching my own feet. She slipped once and I tried to grab her, but she had tipped over and the weight of her backpack dragged her over the side. I watched in horror as she tumbled down into the ravine, bouncing off trees as she went. I saw her skull make a solid impact several times as she tumbled to the bottom and slid to a stop. I couldn't see if she was still breathing or not as I called her name. She didn't move. I called for the ranger in front of us and pointed to her unmoving body. He stared at her for a long time. I don't know if he was trying to see if she was alive or not. He told us to keep going up the trail to the top and he would go check on her. I watched as he carefully made his way down the nearly sheer slope. We kept moving forward as instructed. He was only halfway down when we made it to the top. I was a wreck. I was so happy we made it, but sad for Adrienne. I didn't hold out much hope that the ranger was going to come trotting into camp with her on his back saying she only had a few bumps and bruises. We started a fire and then sat around it in a stupor. Finally, Terry came over and talked to me. "Look, I understand she was your friend, but she was ours too," he said. "We need to work together to get out of here, for them." "That's so stupid it makes sense," I said with the remnants of a smile. It was then the ranger reappeared. He sat by the fire and didn't say a word. There was something in his eyes. It wasn't sadness, but I don't know exactly what it was. We knew she wasn't coming back. We rested for a little while, then started out on the trail again. "If you're following us, I hope you're being careful. Stay safe." Wow, this girl is something else. With all she's gone through, she still wants me to be safe. I hope I find her. I think she'd make a good ranger. My guilty conscience jumped up on my back and yelled at me. "How can you sit around and rest when that poor girl just lost her friend and needs your help?" I knew it was right. I just didn't know why that other ranger was being so careless. I struggled to get up, kicked out the fire, and started after them. The daylight was dimming, but it was only 8 in the morning. I looked up and saw why. Storm clouds were overtaking the sky. Yet another reason I wish I would have brought my backpack. The raindrops hit like a cold slap in the face. Even though it was still September, out here in the mountains the weather can change in a heartbeat. We weren't at the top of the mountain, but in the middle was enough for the weather change to make me shiver. Now that we were out of the ravine, I tried my radio again, but it was just static. I knew there were some places where the radio inexplicably wouldn't work. I just hoped to get away from the interference before it was too late. The trail was clear in front of me, but that was little comfort when walking in open fields with no rain cover. All those trees I tromped through, and now in the rain, I have wide open spaces. I'd say someone doesn't like me. The rain didn't just pass like a spring shower. It poured so hard it became difficult to see in front of me. For a long time, I trudged through the rain. At times it felt like I was walking in place. The mud was starting to cake on my boots. And then my salvation appeared. In front of me on the trail was a tent. I called out before I unzipped the tent and let myself in. I flopped to the wonderful dry floor, then quickly turned and zipped the entrance back up. I breathed a sigh of relief, but as I did a stench assaulted my nose. I looked over at the sleeping bag. It was full. "I'm sorry to barge in like this, but I needed to get out of the rain," I said. No response. I nudged the person in the bag. It tipped to the side and rocked right back. That's when I noticed the splotches of red that had soaked through the bag. I didn't want to see, but I pulled the top of the sleeping bag away from the person's face. The bad part was they no longer had a face. It had been ripped away and the neck had been gouged out. There were large wounds on the body as well. I tried to feel for a pulse, but when my fingers went straight into the muscles of the neck, I figured there was no pulse to feel. I wiped my fingers on the sleeping bag and pondered why this person was covered. I know the animal who did this didn't gently cover up the person with a sleeping bag when it was done. I found my answer laying above the head of the person. It was a note. "I can't believe Terry's dead. I wish I'd never come on this trip. I wish I'd never let Devin bully us into turning down this damn trail. Where the hell is Devin anyway? When he stormed off on his little pity party, did he run across whatever creature has been stalking us? Is he sitting back in his tent now enjoying himself? I really don't know. We were enjoying not climbing up the face of a ravine, but we were very tired." I mentioned stopping and camping for a little bit to the ranger. He looked around and even sniffed the air. That seemed like a weird thing to do. But after that, he agreed to let us set up camp. He even told us to do it as quickly as we could. We gathered wood for a fire, but he told us not to bother because the rain was coming. I guess that explains the sniffing the air thing. Our tents had been up maybe 15 minutes when it started raining. It quickly turned into a downpour. We all offered the ranger to sit in our tents with us. He looked over us one by one. It was kind of creepy. Finally, he said he would sit with Terry in his tent. Dean and I looked at each other with relieved expressions. The ranger is helping us, but he isn't someone I'd like to ever see again. He just acts too weird. At times I wonder if he's really helping. I just closed my eyes listening to the rain on the tent and letting it carry me off to dreamland, and the ranger ripped open my tent. He said we needed to pack up and leave right now. That something was hunting us. We dove out into the rain and miserably packed our tents. He reassured us that there was a cave nearby and we could get shelter there. As I was packing up, I didn't see Terry, so I went over to his tent and knocked. When there was no answer, I went in and found what was left of his body. Something had torn him to shreds. I covered my mouth to keep from vomiting and ran out to tell the others. Dean and the ranger looked in and saw that there was no helping him. The ranger said he had left the tent to go to the bathroom, and when he came back he saw a predator hanging around the tents. That's when he came and woke us. It must have already gotten to Terry. I pulled his sleeping bag over his head and wished we had time to give him a proper burial. But the ranger said the animal might be back for the rest of us. So we quickly packed and left. I barely had time to finish this note. Please help us. A cave? What kind of ranger is he? Doesn't he realize that would be the most likely place a large predator would call home? I thought for a moment what cave he could be talking about. I hadn't been on this trail for 5 years. Ever since I found the kid here. Then it hit me. We were very close to the place where we found him. Why would he take them there, unless... I jumped up so quickly that I nearly fell on top of the body when I forgot and put too much weight on my injured ankle. I hobbled out of the tent and went as quickly as I could toward the place I swore I'd never see again. I approached the cave and my heart sank. 2 backpacks sat just inside the entrance. I pulled out my knife and flashlight, then cautiously peeked inside. I felt a change in the breeze and turned to find the ranger staring at me. I looked him up and down. "You," I said. "The last time I saw you was when we found the boy." He said nothing. "It was never a random animal attack," I said. "It was you." He took a step toward me. "Of course it was," he said. "How wonderful was it to watch you years ago as you floundered around looking for some predator that stood beside you. You son of a bitch." I pulled out my knife and held it ready. He paused, then smiled. "Do you really think that knife can hurt me?" I looked at it. "Pretty sure," I said. "It's made of iron." His smile vanished. "So you do know what I am." I pulled out a bottle of brown water. "I made sure to grab some runoff from the rainstorm," I said. "It might not do as good as rust water, but let's find out." I opened the bottle and threw some water at him. He dodged it as though it was acid. At the same time, I swung with the knife. He dodged with ease. "Why don't you turn into the big pussy that you are?" I said, taunting him. "Because we both know when I transform I'm vulnerable for a moment," he said. "And I'm sure you would love to take advantage of a vulnerable moment." He swung and connected with my stomach, knocking the wind out of me. I recovered and swung the knife in a vicious downswing at him, which he easily dodged. I kept moving forward, stabbing and slashing at him. I couldn't get close enough to connect. He was too fast. "You can't defeat me," he said. "Look at you, like an injured deer just waiting to be devoured." "Be quiet, ye Noblushia," I yelled. At the mention of his name he froze. I knew I didn't have much time. I took advantage of the moment, lunging at him with my knife. If I had been uninjured, I would have closed the distance between us with 2 quick steps and buried the knife in his heart. Unfortunately, in the heat of the moment, I forgot about my injured ankle. I stepped forward on my good leg, then faltered when I tried to put weight on the injured one. Instead of burying the knife in his heart, it went through his left thigh. He screamed in pain and ran out of the cave. I took out my flashlight and started toward the back of the cave. There I found a mutilated body next to a pile of bones. There was a note in her hand. I sat down, took it, and read. "I can't believe how stupid I was not to see this much sooner. All the time guiding us was just a ploy. He never wanted to help us. He never cared about any of us or our safety. I need to write this quickly before he comes back. The ranger led us here and told us to wait, that we'd be safe in the cave. He left us alone." Dean pulled out his flashlight and explored deeper into the cave. He found a large pile of bones. Off to the side of them was a pile of clothes. We ran toward the opening, but the ranger had returned. "So you didn't listen," he said, leering at us. "I told you to stay here, not explore my home." "What are you?" I said. He smiled for the first time since I'd met him. But his smile wasn't comforting, it was terrifying. I watched in horror as he changed into a giant cat creature. It didn't look quite like a panther or mountain lion. He lunged at us with amazing speed. He grabbed my leg and tore a large gash in it. I fell to the floor screaming. Dean tried to defend me, swinging his knife around and holding it at bay, but it stalked around him and cornered him. He only had one chance. He looked at me with sadness in his eyes and then ran past the creature and out of the cave. It looked at me and my leg, then sprinted out after Dean. I know why he did it. He was trying to give me time to escape, but with my leg, there was no way I could outrun that thing. What he actually did was give me time to say goodbye. If you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I led you to your death. If you do somehow survive and make it out of here, please tell our families what really happened here. Goodbye. I fought back tears as I read the final words of this brave girl. I limped to the front of the cave and looked out as the rain stopped. It was like seeing a new world being born. I tried my radio and got an immediate answer. I gave them my GPS coordinates and told them to prepare for casualties. I'm still a park ranger even months later. I made sure that the trail was sealed off. I carry an iron knife and rust water with me at all times. I carry the rust water in a squirt gun, just in case. The bones were removed from the cave and subjected to DNA testing. Aside from this group of victims, including Devon, there were several other people who had gone missing in the park over the years. The official version of the events was that a rogue animal had been hunting people. I was told it would be best for my career if I didn't reveal the true nature of the predator. I still search for the creature and post signs everywhere to be on the lookout for an older ranger wearing a uniform with no patches on it. There's a number to call if anyone spots him. It's my personal cell phone number. From time to time I hear reports of a large cat that's limping on its hind leg. I try to make my way to that spot as quickly as possible, but I have yet to catch him. I posted this story in memory of that brave girl, but also as a warning. Never go on an unposted trail. And beware of those you meet in the woods, even if they wear a uniform. Fifth story. This story was shared by u/group. I'm a Yosemite Park Ranger. Some hikers never leave Cathedral Lake. The job of Yosemite Park Ranger isn't what most people imagine. A lot of people picture us as law enforcement types, handing out tickets and enforcing park rules, when really that's a very niche aspect of it. Mostly we're just here to assist you. Handing out maps, not speeding tickets, and giving people directions to the best views or to ideal camping locations. We remind people about safety and weather conditions from day to day. But the main thing we do, and this is more vital than people realize, is that we're just here in case anyone gets lost or hurt. We deal with a lot of belligerent people who like to think the park is their personal playground where they can do whatever they want. It's my job to remind them to follow the rules. To dispose of their trash properly, to pick up after their dog and to clip its leash back on while walking the trails. Some people take this as a personal assault on their freedoms, when really I'm just looking out for the safety of other visitors, like cyclists and horseback riders who share the paths. Dogs can be unpredictable and can misbehave on trails, and we have to look out for everyone. Still, I don't often get a lot of positive feedback for enforcing the rules. Nobody likes to be told what to do, trust me, I get it. Every once in a while something interesting happens to break up the boredom and monotony of the job. Last summer I was walking around at night, doing a patrol of the campgrounds, when I saw something rustling around in the bushes. A guy came crawling out, dressed in a furry dog costume. I asked him if he was okay and he just barked happily, then crawled away in the opposite direction. Shortly afterwards, I saw him chasing another person who was dressed as a cat, a woman who went scampering away and hid beneath a camper van, laughing excitedly and making purring sounds, licking the dirt from her fur pants with a long tongue. She saw me watching and clawed the air in front of her face, hissing territorially. It's not how I would choose to spend my Friday nights, but I'm not one to judge. By far the most interesting thing which has ever happened to me at Yosemite occurred last summer. And it wasn't just interesting. It was utterly terrifying. Every night when I fall asleep I have nightmares about that day. Every time I close my eyes, I picture those dark tunnels in the rock face. It all started when someone called in a report saying they were out on the Cathedral Lake Trail when their brother went missing. The pair had been out hiking when they got separated somehow. At first we thought it was just a routine mishap. People go missing in Yosemite all the time. It's no big deal in most cases, since usually the missing parties are found quickly enough. Half the time alcohol is involved and I have to remind people to pace themselves if they indulge while camping. But every once in a while those missing people don't turn up, and we have to dispatch much larger search parties. In this case I went out on my own at first, heading to where the man had called us from. I drove out on an ATV, since it was a 16-mile round trip. When I got there, the guy looked frantic. He ran over to me and started speaking way too fast to understand. I told him to slow down, and just give me the facts. It's important to stay calm in these types of situations. The guy took a deep breath and let it out. Then he started talking again, a bit slower this time. We were walking on the trail. He was right beside me. Then I turned around to look at the lake, and when I looked back he was gone. Just fucking gone. I tried to get a sense if the man had been drinking or doing drugs. It's not that I'm trying to assume the worst in people, but we have to think of these types of things. The simplest explanation is usually the right one, after all. And it was much easier to imagine the two brothers taking sips from a Mickey and one of them getting separated and lost than to imagine one of them being abducted by aliens, or taken in a very selective rapture. Slow down for a second. Take some deep breaths. What's your name? Let's start with that. Greg, he said, his face turning a shade less purple as he began to inhale air with trembling breaths in and out. Okay, Greg. I took out my notepad, jotting this down, along with his last name, which I'll leave out for the sake of privacy. And what's your brother's name? Dave, he said, sniffling. I saw he had been crying recently. Where was the last place you saw your brother? Let's retrace your steps. He started protesting, saying that wasn't going to help, but I convinced him we had to at least try. Greg led me back a little ways to where he'd seen his brother last. I walked back here already. And I looked all around here before calling you guys. I thought maybe he went off the trail to take a leak and tripped, hit his head. Something like that, I don't know. I was grasping at straws. But I think something. He hesitated. Something what? I probed. Do you think something took him? Like those stories you hear about? He sounded embarrassed, but I tried to get more out of him, and asked him which stories he was talking about. You know. You hear stories about Yosemite and other national parks. I'm sure you've heard about M. Even if you're not in on the conspiracy. Stories where people go missing like this, and it makes no sense. Someone turns their back for a second and their son or their sister or whoever is just gone. Disappeared, like Dave. I saw it on YouTube. I replied, not sure what corner of the internet this guy had been visiting. Well, that doesn't happen around here, I can assure you. Let's keep looking, I'm sure he'll turn up. But the longer we looked, the less we found. It really did seem like the man's brother had just vanished. I was about to call in for more support, maybe even a K-9 unit, when the man yelled from a little ways off the trail, saying he'd found something. Following the sound of his voice, I eventually came to find him at the base of the mountain, face to face with the granite wall. At first I didn't understand what he was doing there, but as I got closer I saw there was actually a cave which was well hidden in the rock face. It blended in perfectly with the mountainside until you were almost nose to nose with the pale gray stone. "Good job," I said, patting him on the shoulder. But then I looked at our surroundings, getting nervous. We were pretty far from the path, in the thick part of the forest which was overgrown and tangled with vines and shrubbery. "Do you think he would have gone into this cave on his own?" Greg looked around, as if checking to see if his brother had left a message for him. But there was nothing. "I don't think so. It's not like him to just leave me on the trail alone, either. Especially not for this long. If this was a prank or something he'd have come back by now. I can tell something's not right. Has your brother played pranks on you like this before?" I asked. The man was in his 20s, and his brother was probably of a similar age. Young men occasionally got lost or injured trying to scare each other by pulling pranks or filming videos in the woods. It was rare, but it had happened before. "Once or twice," he admitted. "I didn't call you guys for a while because I thought he was messing with me. I wouldn't put it past him. But not for this long. I was getting annoyed. Mosquitoes were biting my neck and I was sweating in the heat of the afternoon, after marching through the foliage for hours. I imagined the guy hiding inside the cave trying to scare his younger brother. Maybe he had fallen asleep in his dark hiding place or he was just pushing it too far, but either way, I was upset. If this was a prank, it had wasted most of my afternoon. It probably annoyed me even more because I had my own older brother who had played tricks on me more than once in our younger days, and this was bringing back memories. "All right. You can come out of there right now," I yelled, marching into the cave, thinking the young man would be hiding in the small alcove. I turned a corner and saw a dark tunnel, leading deep into the darkest recesses of the granite. This made no sense. As far as I knew, there was no tunnel in this location. Especially not one of this size. But it had been well hidden. Nearly invisible in the rock face. I wondered if anyone knew about it. And I wondered if it was safe. I didn't feel comfortable going any further. The dark space looked like it went on for a long, long way into the distance, and I was getting an eerie feeling standing there. It felt like I could almost hear voices whispering from all around me. The words were lost in the echoing cave, and I got a strong sensation that we weren't alone, like icy fingers walking slowly up my spine. The other man came in behind me, marveling at the cave for a second before continuing to press forward. "Come on," Greg said, forging ahead. He might be in trouble. He was anxious to keep going. Not scared enough of this horrifying place with whispering voices coming from the shadows. And his apparent lack of fear made me twice as scared. "I'm going back for help," I said, shuffling backwards. "It isn't safe. Nobody knows we're here." My training and my instincts were overwhelming my curiosity, but Greg seemed not to care about the dangers. The man continued going forward, disappearing into the darkness. A few seconds later he was gone, and there was no indication he had ever existed in the first place. "Greg?" I called out into the black abyss. There was no response. He might as well have been a ghost. An overwhelming urge to follow him rushed over me, and I took a few steps forward, feeling hypnotized by that black tunnel leading on and on forever. But then I shook my head, slapping my face as I tried to wake myself up from whatever trance I was in, which was overruling my common sense. I turned around and left the cave, my legs shaking, my hands unsteady as I called for assistance. After meeting the search party back at the trail, we went through the woods again to find the cave hiding within the 10,000-foot tall rock face of Cathedral Peak. But it was gone. I remembered having trouble finding it the first time, and thinking it was well hidden among the pale gray surface of the mountainside. You had to be nearly face to face with the wall to see it, since it was so invisible among the crags and boulders. I tried to tell my supervisor and the other members of the search party, but they didn't believe me. They said there was no tunnel there. They looked for hours and found nothing. Helicopters swept the area and more teams with more dogs, bloodhounds and German shepherds. But nothing was turned up. There was no trace of anyone else having been out there, except me. Dumbfounded for the rest of the week, and for the rest of the summer, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept going back to that conversation I'd had with the man on the trail named Greg. The man who'd lost his brother and then disappeared into a cave that didn't exist. More and more, I began to wonder what would have happened if I'd followed him. It took a full year for me to build up the courage to go back out to that exact spot again. It happened to be on the same date, and around the same time of day. Only this time, I wasn't on duty. It was my weekend off, so I had plenty of time to comb the area for clues. My backpack was full of provisions and I had enough to last for a night or two in the woods, maybe longer if necessary. Somehow I knew. I just had a feeling that if I went back on that day at that time it would be there. The cave that didn't exist. Cathedral Peak loomed above me, getting larger as I made my way through the forest, moving toward it. The gray clouds above were shrouding the sun in darkness, while the thickening canopy blocked any remaining light from overhead. A chill ran through me, causing me to shiver involuntarily as I laid eyes on the black hole in the rock face, so plain and clear to see now. Taking a step forward, I found myself standing right in front of it, and I reached up my hands to feel the outline of the entryway, as if to confirm it was real. It was. I took a deep breath, like a diver about to submerge, and went inside. The air was cold and damp, with a strange, coppery smell. My flashlight was on my belt and I grabbed it, but then decided not to turn it on. I was getting a strange feeling, like I was in an unsafe place, and needed to stay silent and hidden. There was a sound coming from up ahead which I couldn't place. It was a slurping, chewing sound. Like someone tearing meat from bones with their teeth. As I went deeper and deeper into the tunnel, the air became colder, and so damp that I felt droplets of water running down my face and into my eyes. A trickle of light was filtering in somewhere as well, causing the cavern to faintly glow in places. The air seemed to shimmer and dance in front of my eyes as I went deeper and deeper, feeling entranced as I stumbled along in the shadows. Faintly I realized that there was something wrong with me, as if I had been drugged, but I no longer cared. In fact, I found the sensation to be quite pleasant. And then I was abruptly awoken from my daydream as I came around a corner and saw the horror unfolding within the guts of Cathedral Peak. I can't possibly explain what I saw down there. And the shadows obscured most of it, drenching the monstrous creature in darkness. But the impression I got was of something like an octopus or a squid, crossbred with an oversized plant or a fungus, sucking and slurping, chewing and crunching something between its teeth. After a few moments of inspection, I realized it was a person's face that was being eaten, as the details could just barely be seen in the dim light of the cave. The skin was being stripped from its cheeks, the eyelids ripped off, and the lips peeled back and slurped up like noodles. Tentacles like tangled vines were everywhere, slithering and sliding across the pale gray stone floor all around me. At first I thought it was mud beneath my feet, but as I came fully to my senses I realized it was blood mingling and mixing with the dust beneath my feet, creating a dark, toxic red slurry which sucked at my boot heels. The tentacle vine things were everywhere, I realized with numb shock. My feet were actually stepping on some of them and I was amazed the creature hadn't noticed me yet. But it was obviously too caught up with whatever meal it was currently ingesting. Feeling very glad I hadn't turned on my flashlight, I began to back away very slowly, my boots crunching across the writhing tentacles. A sick knot in my stomach was rising up and threatening to make me puke, fear and revulsion twisting my gut. My mind was spinning and my thoughts were racing, understanding there was a very good chance I would never leave this place. I tried desperately not to step on any more of the squirming, writhing tentacles which moved and twisted on the floor of the cave, soaking and basking in the blood which had been spilled everywhere, like pigs rolling happily in the mud. There was no possible way there could be so much of it, I thought. No one person has this much blood. This is like a river. And then I saw the others. They were hanging suspended from the ceiling, from the walls, from everywhere. Amidst the purple, vine tentacles, they breathed in and out, still being kept alive, but just barely. Dozens of them were strung up and down the length of the cave, their chests rising and falling with weak breaths, but none of them opening their eyes or speaking. It was like they were sleeping. After a few long moments of searching, I found him. Greg. The hiker from the trail who was looking for his brother. He was hanging upside down from the wall just beside me, his eyes closed. Parts of him were missing, a piece of his cheek, part of his hand, but the wounds were slowly healing. The creature, whatever it was, kept its victims alive down there, I realized. It was ingesting them slowly, perhaps even using pieces of its other victims as nutrients to feed the ones who were dying of starvation, like an otherworldly pyramid scheme built of blood and human remains. Shaking that mental image away, I grabbed Greg's shoulder, hoping to wake him up quietly. His eyes shot open a second after I touched him, revealing only the whites, and he began to screech. And I don't mean screeching like he was screaming out of fear of pain or anything like that. This was an inhuman alarm cry which signified to me immediately that there was no shred of humanity left in him. He was now a part of the hive mind of the creature and its tentacle army. As his head turned on a swivel I saw smaller tentacles were wrapped around him, going into his brain and into his neck, invading his ears and eyes, and drilled into his spinal column. I screamed involuntarily, seeing these details, and heard the creature in the tunnel as it recognized my presence. It wasn't fast, whatever it was, but it was huge. The cave shook around me, dust and pebbles falling from the stone ceiling above as I backed away from the hiker. Beneath my feet the vines were suddenly moving quickly, sliding around so that I couldn't find my balance. As soon as my shoes found purchase on the stone floor beneath me, I began to run. The tunnel was alive all around me now, the whipping vines twisting and bending toward me, reaching out like greedy hands trying to grab me as I raced past. Looking over my shoulder, I saw the amorphous creature's central girth was finding its way through the cave and was moving my way a lot faster than I would have thought possible. But then again, I wouldn't have thought any of this was possible before living it. The light of the entryway was just up ahead, and I could smell the fresh air, and could see the sun. Then my feet suddenly slipped as if someone had pulled a rug out from under me and I went crashing to the ground face first. My jaw closed hard and bit the end of my tongue, causing it to bleed, the taste of copper filling my mouth a second later. I tried to get to my feet, the mental image of those poor, trapped people could be seen clearly in my mind's eye. In retrospect, I think the creature, whatever it was, needed us to be unsuspecting. If we were aware of what it was doing, its hypnosis wouldn't work. Maybe it was a chemical it released which caused people to want to explore the cave, a pheromone like insects use to communicate. But it didn't work as well if you knew about it, and if you understood its purpose. It released some more of that pheromone or whatever chemical it was using to lure people in, and I actually felt my legs grow a bit heavier. My eyelids, too. It was like I had suddenly just worked 3 night shifts, and really needed to sleep. But then the wave of hypnosis passed and I felt the rumbling of the ground beneath me, and that broke me from the trance again, causing me to scramble to my feet from the cave floor and run. As I neared the cave entrance and sprinted toward it, leaving my backpack far behind in an effort to lighten the load, I saw the rocks were actually closing in, tightening the gap. The entryway was shrinking somehow. It was the vines, I realized. They were what was camouflaging the entrance, their color changing to match the pale gray stone. I picked up my pace, the twisting forms beneath me making it even more difficult. I didn't dare risk a glance over my shoulder, feeling the rumbling of the floor and knowing that the bulk of the creature was just behind me, closing in. With the gap of the exit narrowing even further, shrinking to the size of a dartboard, I dove headfirst into it, imagining my face slamming into a sheer rock wall as it suddenly turned to stone right in front of me, sealing me in this dark labyrinth of suffering forever with the rest of these tortured souls. My eyes were squinted tightly shut as I felt the vines pulling and tearing at me as I went through the gap. For an instant they squeezed in around my midsection, threatening to stop me like Winnie the Pooh after an unfortunate attempt at pilfering honey, when I popped out of the hole and it sealed up behind me in an instant. I heard a loud crash as the creature flew headlong into its own obstruction. The trap it had created for me to keep me there had hindered its escape, preventing it from chasing after me. I could hear it thrashing and clawing at the vines, desperate for more flesh to sustain itself. Whatever it was growing too large even for its own control. Left alone to feed in the heart of the mountain, it would eventually destroy itself. It would consume its own flesh to sate its monstrous hunger, like a snake eating its own tail. I had a very strong suspicion that it was true. With that very specific idea in mind, I wandered back to my car. It was easier now without the backpack and all the gear. But the walk back to the cave would be harder. There would be lots to carry next time. After a trip to the hardware store, I went back out to the trail. It was nighttime now, and the place was abandoned. I borrowed one of the Ranger ATVs and took my supplies out to the spot where the cave had been. After bringing a few buckets of water from the lake, I began my work. Since I had marked the cave, it was easy to find it again, and to begin laying down the fast-drying cement. As park rangers, our job is usually to stop people from vandalizing mountains in this way, but I got the feeling Mother Nature would forgive me. It was my job to protect this place, and the people who visit it. And nothing could protect people from this thing. It was best to seal it away forever, and let it slowly consume itself. Without a fresh supply of hikers, it would eventually run out of calories. It would eventually expire. It was only a matter of time. The vine tentacles squirmed beneath the layer of cement, groggily reaching out for me, trying to pull me in. I grabbed the trowel and slopped on another thick coating and watched as it rapidly began to dry. And the tentacles began to smooth out and settle down again, falling back asleep. That inhuman shriek could be heard from inside again, much louder this time. As if all of the hikers who the creature had abducted had all woken up at the same instant, and for just a second, realized their predicament. "Sorry, Greg," I muttered to myself, alone in the dark forest. I told you not to go in there. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.